Hello and welcome to another episode of World Class Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Worrell and I'm joined here today by Ian Macbeth. Hello, pal. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm just about recovered from a long 105-mile race, which is topical for what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to cover how to think about solutions, not problems. And that's actually where I learned all about the art of kind of solutions, not problems. But yeah, so I'm a bit achy. I'm a bit broken. But other than that, I'm okay. You all settled into the new place?
Nice. Yeah, I am. Yes, really settled. I was thinking about a conversation we had earlier today about stuff not going on to Rightmove and what have you. And everyone I've spoken to about the house said, "Oh, I bet that didn't go on to Rightmove, did it?" I said, "No, it didn't. But I did value it more than the previous estate agent that had been through." But that whole experience of moving houses, has taught me, well, probably reminded me more a lot about the industry. But yeah, all settled. Been on holiday, back since, and great to be sat, in a room recording for a change rather than over Zoom.
Yeah, I think this episode as well, quick fire, bite size, nice lesson, nice thought process for people. But me and Mike, when we're talking this, we often define two different types of people, two different ways of thinking. One's a shit magnet, and one's a money maker. And in a estate agency, you've probably come across both, right?
Yeah.
And it's very easy to kind of find that shit magnet in the office that just constantly bringing their problems to the office, moody in the morning meetings, and it's just an irritation. And I also relate them to the people that find the problems, and then the money makers often find the solution. They know there's a problem there, but they're thinking about what's the solution to that problem, what's the fix to it. It's taken me a fair bit of time, I would say, to get my head around that. And I've actually got parents that probably sit in both camps. Like my dad is a very negative person by thought process. Amazing dad, loves his kids, big 6'3" superhero in my eyes, but so negative. Like I can't talk about football with him because it's painful. I can't talk about money with him because it's painful. And actually, when you kind of look at it, you think, right, well, these two different definitions of people, which one are you? If you're listening and watching, which one are you? And how do you focus more on solutions? So for me, I'll talk about ultra running in a sec, but that's the way that it kind of evolved.
I think I've always thought and we come across quite a lot of problems in our job, and these aren't, they're not life or death, but they're fairly significant problems for people in their onwards planning if a sale falls through. Those sorts of problems are fairly significant to our clients when we're presenting them. And I've always been a great believer that if you can present a solution to a problem or at least some ideas to try and solve that problem, it will lessen the effect of that problem, massively. So it's something we talk about within our business. Never just take a problem to a client, give them some form of solution. And it might be, this is the plan from here, this is what we do, and these are the reasons that we do it. That phone call is very different if you're telling someone that their sales fallen through versus, oh, your sales fallen through. Your sales fallen through, we've done this already, we're going to do this in the next hour, and tomorrow we're going to do this. That is a very different conversation, because ultimately it takes the mind from big problem to, right, this person can actually help me get through this.
I always used to train with the staff back in the day. If you've got that call that you have to make, because everyone hates making that call. It's probably the worst call that we have to make as agents, right? And we know we're going to upset someone. Normally it's our fault, even if it's not our fault. It's our fault. Yeah. So what I always used to try and say is, look, you're going to give bad news. The best thing you can do when you give bad news is give some good news with it. So, it's the whole, do you want the good news or the bad news first? Everyone always wants the bad news first, then they want a little bit of good news. It feels a bit better afterwards. So with a sale fall through, for example, if it was a negotiator that was like, they're going to be so pissed off. Yeah, they are. But what you could do is you could just check in with a couple of buyers if they potentially be interested in making a viewing on it. Give them the exclusive heads up that, look, this property might come available. Would you be interested in taking a look? One of them says yes, there's your good bit of good news. Absolutely. So when you make the fall through, say, look, it is bad, but I have spoken to 2 or 3 of my hot buyers. The positive is Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so would like to come round. Now, I know it's early, you're probably half boxed up or you're not ready for viewings. Give it a couple of days, but there's interest. So don't be too disheartened. And you kind of, you finish a kick with a kiss, basically.
Yeah, that is
not physically.
That is. I was just wondering how you met your wife. That is that is exactly it in that scenario. And hopefully, loads of agents listening would go down that road. But a lot of what we do in this industry is just overcoming, small problems, and then the difference between, what did you call them? A shit magnet or a money maker. That is probably that attitude in general, rather than just being able to overcome problems. But actually, I suppose the money maker, one of their characteristics will be maybe not accepting the problem as a problem, but actually it's a motivation in them to try and find that solution rather than dwell on the negatives.
And you see it a lot in sports teams, high performance sports teams, where someone's just totally demoralised. We were talking about a couple of players off camera a minute ago that might get transferred out, and you just see them totally demoralised.
Yes,
but
yeah.
You use Leicester City as the prime example. They won the league based on momentum,
yes,
mindset. They weren't the most talented, they weren't the most expensive put together team, but they just had this cohesion of being unbeatable, and that drove them all the way through. And after that happened, a couple of seasons later, they got relegated.
Yeah.
Which just shows that drop in grace that can happen. And in agency, when we're dealing with sales teams or confidence or business or whatever it may be, to get in that good momentum means you need to go, okay, there's a problem, but I can fix it. Even if you don't know the answer yet, I can fix that. I'll be able to solve it. And it was me getting into ultra training and ultra running that got me into that state of mind. Because people say, how do you get, what's it like? How do you do it? What, you don't sleep? What the hell? And actually, a lot of ultra training is problem solving. You have to have a core fundamental level of fitness, but you also have to be in a position when you've run for 46 miles, you roll your ankle, you've got the biggest blister you've ever seen on your big toe. It's dark, potentially. You're super tired, you're dehydrated, and you have to then fix that problem or you quit. And that's why in a lot of 100-mile races, it's over 50% that DNF, because you've got shit magnets and money makers. And in this case, the money makers are the ones that finish, because they go, we're all going to have problems. Who's going to fix the problems and who's going to quit?
So I was listening to a podcast on the way here, and it was the Navy SEAL who shot Osama bin Laden. And he was asked the question, how much of your life and career do you think is mindset, and how much do you think is physical ability? He said 95% mindset. I'll ask the same question to you in terms of ultra running and those races. How much is mindset? How much is physical ability?
I always put the 80-20 rule to pretty much everything. I think it applies to more or less everything. And included in mindset is education and knowledge and experience. Yeah. And that's probably something that helps me, is the more educated I am around nutrition, the more experienced I am around those different problems. I had a real bad dehydration problem on a couple of races where I just couldn't get enough fluids in. I'm a high sweating runner, but then you learn how to adapt to that. It's like, okay, well, I need more salt and I need more hydration. I need more electrolytes because I can't get the water in, but at least I've got the stuff that I need. So I think 80-20 rule to anything. And I think it's the same with business. I think it's the same with agency. I think it's the same, just take it down to a listing. If you look at that listing in its total focus, there's an 80% chance you get that through to completion. If you do everything perfectly well, still 20% that you can't do anything about. It could be a problem. And that's probably why in a estate agency, 55% of what's listed sells, is because of that middle section. The difference of being an 80% agent, the best of the best, versus being a 40%, which is below average in this case, is that window in the middle. And that's how many ship magnets and problem finders, solution solvers you've got in the team, basically.
I always say, when on that same sort of thing, I don't think estate agency is rocket science. It's a lot of little things, either done badly or not done at all, done well. The version that we like to think that we are is that we'll do all those little things that collectively combine to get you the result that you're looking for. And in this instance, when we're talking about trying to find solutions to problems, those little things might be waking up in the morning and writing down your goals. They might be going for a walk, before you speak to anyone, or exercising regularly, or whatever those little things might be in life. They also contribute in estate agency. In estate agency, it might be something like making sure the square footage is on the Rightmove listing. Just like a really small, like a lot of people will see it and think actually it's irrelevant, and maybe it is irrelevant to 20% of the people, but maybe to the other 80 it's not. And those little things that you can do in life also resonated in estate agency, and the difference between getting your property sold and actually, getting it through to completion.
The little things that you talk about there are a prime example of that discipline and that organisation. I always remember this. I had a guy called Ryan in a couple of different teams that I had, and he started somewhere else with another manager in another big office, and he was young lad, 18, office gopher, the equivalent of a trainee, kind of at that point, just doing dog shit roles, for like a year, this guy did. And he wasn't great on the phone. He wasn't the best at negotiating. He wasn't a natural salesperson. But any office I needed to improve, he'd be one of the first people I'd want to put in there, because he was neat, tidy, super organised, always on time, happy to work super hard, and never missed a trick. The most organised person in the team, always viewing feedback on time, done to habitually as it should be. And he did all the little things 7 out of 10, which meant he was one of the most important people in the team, because some people are 10 one day, 4 the next, or they do something really well and awful. He was just so consistent. You see it in football teams, don't you? You look at Jordan Henderson.
That's the name that came to mind.
He's a prime example, isn't it? An Owen Hargreaves back in the day, and those sort of players, vital players, in a football team. And he was that person. Those estate agency teams are in really good places when you get there. You try and put them in a valuation role. Yeah. It's not for them. They can't go and win business. You put them in an office as like the water carrier,
the glue that knits the team together,
and they're vital. So it's just in your mindset. If you can adopt some of those things, if you want to be the most all-rounded person, got to find the solutions, got to be well disciplined, and that can get you on the path to being a world-class real estate agent just by doing those basics really well.
Yeah, it doesn't. Like I say, it's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be rocket science, though. You've said time and time again, we're in an industry where your skill set actually, certainly on entry, can be fairly low, but actually you can earn quite a lot of money. But actually, the habits and the mindset in particular that we're talking about today can make a massive difference of making the difference whether you get there and achieve those, good earnings, or whether you drop out and actually decide the industry is not for you.
And I think it's recruitment as well, because it's a different world recruiting now as it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's a topic to kind of briefly cover is you've also got to think of that generation. We're saying, there's no great agents coming through, but the great agents in 10 years' time are going to be very different to the great agents today. Yeah. So you've almost got to recruit for what you need in 3 years' time, because 3 years worth of education, potentially they're on the verge of becoming a great agent. Not really before that. No one's a great agent in their first 3 years, maybe 5. And then you start to see some really talented agents. So you've also got to think of what type of person you need in your team in 3 or 4 years' time. So, are you recruiting an agent because they're going to be the face of your camera? They're going to be the face of your social media channel. Are you recruiting someone because they're going to be an absolute whiz on nurture and email copywriting and scripting and blogs and SEO for your website? Or are you recruiting someone because they're just going to be a great person in the office on a Thursday afternoon when everyone's had a shit week and they're still going, come on, we got a day, we can get this turned around. They're just positive all the time. You've got to think about that as well.
Yeah. That was you back to manager mode a few years ago, that wasn't it? I saw it in the eyebrows. Don't get that on too.
There's a lot of power in these eyebrows. You'll see that face to face now we're doing these. But no, it was very much about putting that team together. I've spoke to you before about having an A and a B, an assistant manager and a manager that were totally different, because you don't want two animals in that role. They're just going to fight. Yeah. But if you've got a really, really good beta with an alpha, then you're in for a good place. Doesn't matter which way round they are, to be honest with you, as long as you've got that nice complement to each other. So think about it. Are you a shit magnet or are you the money maker? That's the episode right there.
As you know, we do this because we love our industry. We want to see it improve and get better. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please share it out on social media. I'm Mark Worrell, he's Ian Macbeth, and we'll see you again next week.